The morning started with soft sunlight coming through the window. The room smelled like fresh flowers and warm tea. She sat quietly on the edge of the bed, her wedding dress hanging nearby, covered in a thin plastic sheet. Her hands trembled as she looked at herself in the mirror. She was nervous, but happy. This was supposed to be the day that changed everything. Family members moved in and out of the room. Someone adjusted her hair. Someone else reminded her to eat. Laughter floated in from the hallway, mixed with music coming from downstairs. Everything felt busy but warm, full of hope. She checked her phone again. No new message. It wasn't unusual. The groom had been busy the past few days. He had said weddings were stressful, and she believed him. She trusted him. She always had. Outside guests were already arriving. Cars lined the street. Bright clothes, smiling faces, and quiet excitement filled the air. People greeted each other with hugs and jokes. Everyone talked about how perfect the couple looked together, how lucky she was, how beautiful the day had turned out. Inside, the clock kept moving. An hour before the ceremony, she sent him a short message, just asking where he was, just checking in. She smiled while typing it, trying to calm her heart. No reply. She told herself not to worry. Maybe he was on the way. Maybe his phone battery had died. Small problems always had simple answers. She believed that too. As the ceremony time grew closer, the house became quieter. The music stopped. The laughter faded. Her mother stood near the window, checking the street again and again. Her sister whispered into her phone, calling numbers that went straight to voicemail. She sat very still. Someone said, "He'll be here any minute." Another person said, "Traffic is bad today." She nodded along, even when her chest started to feel tight. She didn't want to be difficult. She didn't want to ruin anything. She had spent her whole life trying to hold things together quietly. The official ceremony time passed. Guests waited. Some smiled politely. Others shifted in their seats. A few checked their watches. The whispers started softly, then grew louder. People tried not to look at her, but she could feel their eyes anyway. She stood up and walked to a private room, her long dress trailing behind her. Once the door closed, the silence pressed down hard. Her hands shook as she called him again. This time the call didn't ring. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. Her stomach dropped. A cold feeling spread through her body, slow and heavy. Someone knocked gently on the door. "Any update?" a voice asked quietly. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out at first. Then she said, "Not yet." Minutes turned into another half hour. Finally, a close family member stepped inside the room and sat beside her. The look on their face said everything they didn't want to say out loud. No one could reach him. His phone was off. No messages. No explanation. The wedding was officially delayed. But everyone knew something was terribly wrong. Guests began to leave. Some did it politely. Others made excuses. A few whispered things they thought she couldn't hear. She stayed seated, staring at the floor, her dress slowly losing its meaning. The flowers felt too bright. The decorations felt wrong, like they belonged to someone else. Hours later, when the sun began to sink, the truth could no longer be avoided. The groom was not coming. No one said the words clearly. They didn't have to. The empty space said enough. The untouched seat at the front. The silence where vows should have been. Her heart felt numb. Not broken yet. Just empty. She stood up on her own. She walked outside, past the guests who were still nearby, past the decorations that now felt like a cruel joke. No one stopped her. No one knew what to say. That evening, she removed her wedding dress by herself. She folded it carefully and placed it back into the bag, as if being gentle could somehow soften the moment. Then she sat on the bed in plain clothes, staring at nothing. That night, her phone finally buzzed. A message appeared. It was short, cold, unclear. He said he was sorry. He said everything had become too much. He said he needed time. No reasons. No explanation. No promise to return. Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped the phone. That was it. No calls after that, the next morning. The story had already started spreading. Neighbors knew. Distant relatives knew. People she had never spoken to before suddenly had opinions. Some felt sorry for her. Others quietly judged. She stayed inside, avoiding everyone. Each sound outside made her flinch. Every message felt heavy, even the kind ones. By the third day, reality settled in. The wedding was over. The relationship was over, and she was left alone with the weight of it all. She didn't know yet what this loss would lead to. She only knew that her life had cracked open in front of everyone, and she had no idea how to put it back together. All she could do was breathe and survive the day. The days after the wedding passed slowly, like time had forgotten how to move. She woke up each morning hoping the whole thing had been a bad dream. But the quiet house, the untouched decorations, and the folded wedding dress in the corner told her the truth again and again. People stopped calling after the first few days. At first, her phone was full of messages asking if she was okay. Then those became shorter. Then they stopped coming at all. Life moved on for everyone else. Only hers felt stuck. Going outside became difficult. Whenever she stepped out, she felt eyes on her. Some people looked at her with pity. Others looked at her with curiosity, like her pain was a story for entertainment. A few avoided her completely, unsure of what to say. She tried returning to work, thinking routine might help. On her first day back, everyone was unusually quiet around her. Conversations stopped when she walked into a room. Someone offered her tea in an awkward voice. Another person told her how strong she was, even though she didn't feel strong at all by lunchtime. She locked herself in the restroom and cried silently, holding her hand over her mouth. No one would hear. Money soon became another worry. The wedding had drained most of her savings. Gifts were returned. Some expenses still needed to be paid. She had planned her future carefully, believing she wouldn't face it alone. Now every bill felt heavier, every decision scarier. At night she replayed the past in her head. Every conversation, every promise, every moment she had ignored a strange feeling in her chest, because love told her to trust. She checked her phone, more times than she wanted to admit. No new message came. Then one evening, something unexpected happened. While returning home from work, she noticed a small crowd near the corner of the street. An older man had collapsed on the sidewalk. People stood around, unsure what to do. Someone suggested calling an ambulance, but no one moved quickly. Her heart raced. She didn't think. She stepped forward. She knelt beside the man, speaking softly, asking if he could hear her. She remembered basic first aid from an old training session at work. Her hands shook, but she followed what she knew. Within minutes, a car stopped abruptly. A man stepped out quickly, calm but focused. He knelt beside them, checked the man's breathing, and gave clear instructions to the people around. Everything changed in that moment. The stranger worked with quiet confidence. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't panic. His movements were steady, practiced. She followed his instructions without question. When the ambulance finally arrived, the man on the ground was stable. Only then did the stranger look at her properly. "Thank you for staying," he said. His voice was calm, respectful. Not rushed. She nodded, suddenly aware of how tired she felt. Her knees ached. Her hands were still shaking. They stood up together. He introduced himself simply as a doctor. Nothing more. They didn't talk long. There was no dramatic moment. No exchange of personal stories. He just said she had done well and encouraged her to take care of herself before leaving. He paused and said, "Not many people step forward anymore." Those words stayed with her that night. For the first time in weeks, she slept without crying. Over the next few days, she thought about that moment more than she expected. Helping someone else had briefly taken her out of her own pain. It reminded her that she was still capable of doing something meaningful. A week later, she saw him again. This time it was at a small clinic near her workplace. She recognized him immediately, though he looked different in a simple coat, focused on his work. She hadn't planned to speak to him, but their eyes met, and he recognized her too. He gave a small nod. Later, when she passed by the front desk, The nurse asked her if everything was okay. She hesitated, then asked quietly if the doctor from that day worked there. "He owns the clinic," the nurse said casually. That surprised her. Still, he treated her no differently. When she came in with a minor health issue a few days later, he spoke gently, listened carefully, and never rushed her. There was no trace of judgment when he noticed how tense she was. "You've been under stress," he said simply. She wanted to deny it. Instead, her eyes filled with tears. He handed her a tissue and waited. She didn't tell him everything, just said life hadn't gone as planned. He nodded, as if he understood without details. "You don't have to carry it all at once," he said. Something about the way he spoke felt different. No pressure, no advice she didn't ask for. When she left the clinic that day, she felt lighter. Even though nothing in her life had truly changed yet, she didn't realize it then. But that small meeting was the beginning of a slow shift. For the first time since the wedding, someone had seen her not as the woman who was left, but as the woman who survived. And unknowingly, her path was starting to bend toward something new. Life did not suddenly become easy after that meeting at the clinic. Her problems did not disappear. Bills still arrived. Work was still uncomfortable. Nights were still long. But something small had changed inside her. There was a quiet feeling that she was not completely invisible anymore. She returned to the clinic a few weeks later, this time just for a routine checkup. She told herself it was about her health, nothing more. Still, her heart beat a little faster when she saw him walking down the hallway. He greeted her politely, just as before. No special attention. No personal questions. Just calm professionalism. During the appointment, he noticed how tired she looked. He asked how she had been sleeping. She gave a small shrug. He did not push. "You're doing your best," he said after a moment. "Sometimes that's enough for now." No one had told her that in a long time. Over the next few months, their paths crossed again and again, always in ordinary ways. Sometimes she visited the clinic. Sometimes she saw him outside, heading to his car late in the evening. Each time, they exchanged a few words. Nothing dramatic. Just small, steady conversations that felt easy. He never asked about the wedding. Never mentioned rumors or gossip. She appreciated that more than she knew how to explain. Slowly, she opened up little by little. One evening, as the sun was setting, she admitted that she often felt embarrassed walking into crowded places, that she still felt like people were watching her. He listened quietly. "People forget faster than we think," he said. "And the ones who don't, they usually aren't worth carrying in your heart." She thought about those words for days. At work, things grew worse. Cuts were being made. Her position was no longer secure. When she finally lost her job, she sat alone in her apartment, staring at the floor. Feeling the same sinking fear she had felt on her wedding day, she didn't know who to call without thinking too much. She went to the clinic. It was late, and she almost turned back at the door, but the nurse recognized her and let her sit quietly in the waiting area. When he came out and saw her, he immediately noticed something was wrong. They didn't talk in detail. He simply asked if she was safe, if she had a place to go, if she had eaten. He didn't offer solutions right away. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's okay," he replied. "You don't have to know tonight." He gave her information about a short-term job opportunity connected to the clinic. Nothing fancy. Just honest work that paid enough to help her breathe for a while. She hesitated. "Worried about pride?" "Taking help doesn't make you weak," he said gently. "It gives you room to stand again." She accepted. Working there gave her structure, purpose. She arrived early. She worked carefully. Slowly, she felt useful again. She learned more about him during that time. Not from what he said, but from how he treated people. He stayed late when patients needed him. He spoke kindly to staff. He never reminded anyone of his status. Only later did she learn how successful he truly was. Not just a doctor, but someone who had built clinics from almost nothing. Someone with money, influence, and options. He never acted like it. One evening, After closing hours, they sat in silence for a few minutes. Both clearly tired. "You didn't disappear," he said suddenly. She looked at him, confused. "Many people do when life hits hard," he continued. "They close themselves off completely." "You didn't," she swallowed. "Some days I want to," she admitted. "But you don't," he replied. That was when she realized something important. This support felt different from romance or rescue. He wasn't saving her life. He was simply giving her space to rebuild it herself. Still, fear lived quietly in her chest. What if she trusted again and fell apart again? What if kindness was just temporary? One afternoon, a letter arrived. It was from the groom. Her hand shook as she opened it. Inside were excuses, confusion, blame placed everywhere except where it belonged. He wrote about pressure, about debts, about running away instead of facing its consequences. There was no real apology. She felt anger rise for the first time that night. She told the doctor about the letter. He listened calmly. "You don't owe him peace," he said, "but you deserve it." Those words stayed with her. As weeks passed, she stood a little taller, spoke a little firmer, laughed occasionally, surprising herself. She was not healed, but she was healing. And for the first time since the wedding day, the future no longer felt like a closed door. It felt like something waiting to be opened. By the time the season changed, she noticed how different her days felt. They were still busy and often tiring, but they no longer felt empty. She woke up with purpose. Even on hard mornings, she knew why she was getting out of bed. Working at the clinic became part of her routine. She learned how things ran, how people depended on one another. She spoke with patients, helped where she could, and slowly gained confidence again. Some days were overwhelming, where she reminded herself that she had survived worse. The doctor continued to treat her with the same quiet respect. He never crossed a line, never rushed anything. He checked in on her when work got stressful and reminded her to rest. His support felt steady, like a hand at her back instead of someone pulling her forward. One evening, after a long day, she stayed behind to organize files. The clinic was quiet. Lights were dim. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. He offered her a ride home. She hesitated, then agreed. The drive was calm. No loud music. No awkward moments. Just the sound of rain and the road. Halfway there, he asked her how she had really been feeling. She took a deep breath. "I'm scared of getting used to things going well," she admitted. "Every time life feels stable, I expect it to fall apart again." "That fear makes sense," he said. "But don't let it stop you from living." That was the night she allowed herself to feel grateful without guilt. A few days later, another message appeared on her phone. This time, it wasn't just a letter. The groom wanted to meet. Her chest tightened. For hours, she stared at the message, unsure what to do. Part of her wanted to ignore it forever. Another part wanted answers she never received. She told the doctor about it the next day. He listened carefully. "If you go," said gently, "go for yourself, not for him." After a restless night, she agreed to meet in a public place. When he arrived, he looked smaller somehow, nervous, avoiding her eyes. He spoke quickly, explaining how plans had collapsed around him, how money problems had grown, how fear had taken control. She listened without interruption. Then she asked the one question that mattered. "Why didn't you tell me?" He had no real answer. That silence gave her everything she needed. She realized something important in that moment. He did not disappear because life became hard. He disappeared because he chose the easy way out. She stood up calmly. "I carried this alone in front of everyone," she said. "You don't get to carry your guilt by handing it back to me." She walked away without looking back. That night she cried. Not from pain, but from release. When she returned to the clinic the next day, something was different. She felt lighter, stronger, the doctor noticed. "You seem freer," he said. "I am." She replied. As time passed, people at work began to treat her differently. Some admired her dedication. Others trusted her more. She was no longer just someone passing through. One afternoon, the clinic faced a sudden challenge. Equipment issues caused patient delays. Tension filled the halls. Without being asked, she stepped up, helped organize schedules, comforted waiting families, and kept things moving. Later that evening, he thanked her. "You handled that better than most professionals," he said. She smiled, surprised by her own confidence. Weeks later, he invited her to attend a community health event sponsored by the clinic. She almost declined, afraid of standing beside someone so well known. But she went. She wore a simple outfit. Nothing fancy. Just herself. People spoke to her politely. Some recognized her work. No one whispered. No one stared. She realized the shame she once felt had slowly lost its power. That evening, as they walked back to their cars, she stopped suddenly. "I don't want to be rescued," she said. He smiled softly. "I know," he replied, "and I wouldn't want to rescue you. I respect you." That meant more to her than any promise ever could. Still, fear returned sometimes, quietly late at night. What if she trusted this path and lost everything again? But then she remembered the woman. She had been on her wedding day, frozen, waiting. She was not that woman. Anymore. She had stood up, she had spoken, she had walked away, and for the first time, the future no longer scared her as much as it excited her. Something real was forming. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just honest. And it all began because she chose herself. The days that followed felt steady in a way she had never known before. Not perfect. Not easy. Just honest. She woke up early, made simple breakfasts, and walked to work with her shoulders relaxed. The weight she used to carry did not disappear, but it no longer controlled her steps. At the clinic, she was trusted now. People came to her with questions. New staff looked to her for guidance. Patients thanked her for listening when they were nervous or afraid. She learned that kindness, when mixed with consistency, could quietly change the atmosphere of a place. The doctor noticed too, though he never made a show of it. He respected her space, her pace. Their conversations stayed thoughtful and real. Some days they talked about work, other days about books, late-night thoughts, and the strange paths people find themselves on. One evening after closing, they walked outside together. The sky was calm, painted with soft color. She realized she was no longer counting the days since the wedding. She was counting the things that were growing instead. "I was afraid my past would always define me," she said suddenly. He stopped and looked at her. "Your past explains you," he said. "It doesn't decide you." The words stayed with her. Weeks passed. Then months. She moved into a small new place, closer to work. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers. She painted one wall a warm color and placed a chair near the window where sunlight came in during the mornings. Some nights she sat there quietly, peaceful in a way she once thought was impossible. The doctor never asked her to rush into anything, and because of that, slowly, carefully, something real formed between them. Not a rescue, not a contract, just trust. One afternoon, while organizing records, she overheard two visitors talking about a wealthy doctor who owned several clinics and funded free medical camps. She smiled quietly. She already knew this side of him, not from money, but from the way he showed up when no one was watching. When she finally spoke to him about what this connection meant to her, she did it honestly. "I don't want promises," she said. "I want honesty." In time, he nodded. "That's what I want too." The simplicity of it moved her more than grand words ever could. Later that year, life tested her again. Her mother fell ill. Fear returned, sharp and sudden. Hospital visits replaced quiet evenings. Old worries tried to take control, but this time, she was not alone. He supported her without taking over. He made calls when she was too tired. He waited patiently outside rooms. He reminded her to eat. When she broke down, he didn't rush her back together. He just stayed. Her mother recovered slowly, and she realized something important. Strength did not mean standing alone. It meant choosing who was allowed to stand beside you. One day, while walking home, she passed the old wedding venue. She paused for a moment, surprised by how little it hurt now. There was no anger, no regret, only gratitude. Because if life had not fallen apart that day, she would not be standing here now later that night. She and the doctor talked quietly over tea. "I don't feel broken anymore," she said. "You never were," he replied. She smiled. The future did not appear as a perfect picture. There were still unknowns, still risks, still fear, but there was also choice and hope. Months later, she was offered a permanent position at the clinic with responsibilities she'd never imagined herself capable of handling before. She accepted without second-guessing herself. She had learned how to trust her own strength. The day she officially signed her contract, they did not celebrate loudly. They walked home together, laughing about small things, stopping for street food, enjoying the ordinary. She understood now that real happiness often lives in quiet moments. As the year came to an end, she stood by her window again, watching the city lights below. She thought about the woman she had been, standing in a wedding dress, waiting for someone who never came. That woman had felt lost. This woman felt whole. Life had not gone according to plan. It had gone somewhere better. Not because a millionaire doctor changed her fate, but because she chose to stand back up, and the right person chose to walk beside her. Life had a quieter rhythm now, but it never stopped testing her. Just when things began to feel settled, new challenges arrived, reminding her that growth did not mean ease. It meant readiness. At the clinic, responsibilities increased. More decisions rested on her shoulders. On some days, she doubted herself, wondering if she truly belonged in a place where people trusted her judgment. But every evening, when she reflected on the day, she saw proof of how far she had come. The doctor watched her handle pressure with calm strength. He admired how she listened before responding, how she treated everyone with dignity. Their connection deepened slowly, not through big moments, through shared silence and small understanding. One afternoon, a former friend from the past reached out. The message was polite but heavy with questions. People had noticed her change. They wanted to know how she moved on, how she rebuilt so quietly. She stared at the message for a long time before. Replying, she wrote only one sentence. "I stopped waiting for my life to return and started living the one in front of me." That truth surprised even her, as word spread about her work at the clinic. She began helping with outreach programs. She spoke to women who felt stuck, ashamed, or forgotten. She never told her whole story. She didn't need to. Her honesty lived in her voice, her patience, the way she looked people in the eye. Some nights, memories returned unexpectedly. The wedding hall, the empty seat, the long walk out. Those memories no longer caused panic. They felt distant, like pages from a book she had finished reading. One evening, while sorting old documents at home, she found the wedding invitation she never threw away. She held it gently, then folded it and placed it in the trash. She didn't cry. It was simply time. The doctor invited her to join him for a weekend break. Nothing fancy. Just a quiet place away from work. She hesitated, fear whispering old warnings. "What if things change?" she asked. "They will," he replied calmly. "That's life. But we don't stop walking because the road moves." She agreed. The trip was simple. Long walks, quiet meals, comfortable conversation. There were no promises made, only presence. She noticed how safe she felt speaking her mind, how free she felt laughing without fear. One night, sitting beneath the open sky, she realized she no longer felt guarded. She felt open. That realization scared her more than heartbreak ever had. But she chose to stay with it. When they returned, life continued. Work grew busy again. Responsibilities stacked higher. Yet something inside her had settled. One morning, she was asked to lead a small team permanently. The offer terrified her. The old version of her would have stepped back. She accepted. Fear did not disappear. It simply stopped making decisions for her. At home that evening, she watched the city lights and thought about fate, about how she once believed life happened to her. Now, she understood something deeper. Life responded to the choices she made. The groom from the past never contacted her again. And for the first time, she felt thankful for that silence. The future came closer each day, no longer as a threat, but as a space she could step into freely. She had stopped surviving. She was living in whatever came next. She knew one thing for sure. She would meet it standing. Not waiting time, moved forward in a quiet, steady way. The kind of time that does not rush, but also does not wait. She learned to move with it instead of against it. Her role at the clinic grew naturally. She was no longer surprised when people trusted her decisions. She had faced fear before and learned how to stay calm inside it. That made her dependable in ways books could never teach. Sometimes new staff asked how she became so confident. She always smiled and said she had made many mistakes. That answer felt honest. The doctor remained a constant presence in her life, but never a shadow. They gave each other space to grow, to breathe, to choose. Their relationship did not need labels to feel real. It was built on listening, respect, and shared silence. One afternoon, she was asked to speak at a small gathering for women going through difficult changes. She almost said no. Public speaking still made her stomach turn. But she remembered how close she once came to giving up. She stood in front of the room, with steady hands. "I didn't rebuild my life all at once," she said. "I rebuilt it one decision at a time." People listened quietly. Some nodded. Some wiped tears. She realized then that her story had become bigger than her pain. At home, life felt peaceful. Ordinary routines brought comfort instead of boredom. Cooking simple meals, watering plants, watching the sky change colors at dusk, she no longer searched for signs of what might go wrong. She trusted what was right. One evening, while walking through the city, she passed a jewelry store window. For a brief second, memories stirred. The ring she once planned to wear. The vows she once believed in. She kept walking. The future did not require proof. Later that year, clinic opened a new branch to serve people who could not afford proper care. She helped organize it from the ground up. Long days, tired nights, yet meaningful progress. She saw a change happen in real time. That was enough. On a quiet weekend, she and the doctor returned to the place where they had spent that simple break long ago. This time felt different, more settled. More certain? There were no speeches. Only a shared understanding that choosing each other did not mean losing themselves. As night came, she looked up at the sky and felt something she once thought she had lost forever. Peace. Her past no longer followed her like a shadow. It walked behind her, quiet. Finally respectful, the woman who once waited at a wedding hall was gone. In her place stood someone who chose her own life every day, and that choice changed everything. Years passed in a way that felt gentle, almost kind. Time no longer rushed her or stood still to remind her of what she had lost. It moved beside her, steady, allowing her to grow without pressure. The clinic became more than a workplace. It became a place of healing, not only for patients but for the people who served there. She helped train new staff, sharing lessons learned from experience rather than theory. They respected her not because of a title, but because she stayed calm when things went wrong. Some days were exhausting. Long queues, hard stories, tears she could not fix. But she never questioned her purpose anymore. Helping others had given her life a shape that felt honest. The doctor continued his work quietly, supporting causes that never made headlines. When people praised him, he redirected the attention. When problems came, he faced them without complaint. Watching him reminded her that character revealed itself best in ordinary moments. Their relationship stayed grounded. They did not post pictures for approval or make public promises. They shared morning walks, late conversations, and moments of stillness that needed no explanation. One evening, while organizing old paperwork, she found her personal file from years earlier. Notes from when she first joined the clinic. Doubt written between the lines. Fear she once carried like a shadow. She smiled softly. That woman had survived. More than she realized. A young woman visited the clinic one afternoon, visibly shaken, holding back tears. She reminded her of herself from long ago, someone whose life plan had suddenly collapsed. She sat with her patiently, said only one thing: "You're not late to life. You're just starting a different chapter." The words felt true. Later that night, she thought about endings. How she once believed closure came from answers and apologies. She now understood that. Closure often came from acceptance. On a quiet walk home, she paused near a small park. Children laughed nearby. An older couple sat on a bench, hands loosely joined. Life unfolded without asking permission. She felt grateful not for what she had gained, but for what she had learned. Loss had taught her depth. Pain had taught patience. Standing alone had taught her choice. One weekend, she and the doctor visited her childhood neighborhood. Roads felt smaller than she remembered. Houses looked unchanged, frozen in time. She realized how far she had traveled. Not in distance, but in understanding. That night, she wrote a short letter to herself, not to the broken. Version 2, the braver one, she thanked herself for staying, for choosing growth when walking away would have been easier, for trusting again without losing herself. She placed the letter in a drawer and closed it gently. Life continued. Not loudly, but with meaning, and that was enough. Life did not announce its milestones anymore. It moved quietly, measured not by dramatic turns, but by ordinary days that felt full. She learned to notice those days. They were where meaning lived. At the clinic, people often came and went, but her presence remained steady. New faces did not intimidate her. Difficult cases did not shake her the way they once might have. She knew now that not every problem could be solved, but every person could be treated with care. She found purpose in small routines, reviewing schedules, checking on staff who looked tired, sitting with patients who needed reassurance more than instructions. These moments shaped her days more than any big event. The doctor continued his work with the same quiet dedication. They never spoke about how different their lives had become because words were unnecessary. They felt it in the ease between them, in the way silence never felt awkward, in the way disagreements never turned into fear. One afternoon, she was asked to help mentor someone new to the clinic. The person was nervous, unsure if they belonged. She recognized that look immediately. "You'll grow into it," she said gently. "No one arrives ready." Speaking those words, she realized how much she had changed. Her evenings were calm now. She cooked simple meals, sometimes alone, sometimes shared. She kept her phone nearby, but no longer waited for it to change her life. Life was already happening. There were moments when memories returned without warning. A song from long ago, a scent that reminded her of the wedding day she never lived. But those memories had lost their power. They no longer asked questions. They simply existed. One quiet night, she walked past the old road where the wedding venue once stood decorated. The building looked smaller than she remembered. Ordinary. She felt no pull toward it. That surprised her in the past. She believed healing meant forgetting. Now she knew it meant remembering without pain. As months passed, she began helping plan long-term community work through the clinic. It wasn't glamorous. Funding was tight. Schedules were difficult. But she enjoyed the challenge. Creating access felt meaningful. During one outreach visit, she watched a child leave smiling after receiving care that would have once felt out of reach. That moment stayed with her. She understood that the life she lived now reached beyond her own story. One evening, while sitting with the doctor after a long day, she spoke softly. "I used to believe my life ended the day I was left," she said. "Now I see it only changed direction." He nodded. "Some roads lead to places we didn't know we needed," he replied. She smiled. They never rushed to define their future. What they shared felt steady, not demanding. They made plans, but they also allowed room for surprise. That balance felt right. There were still fears sometimes. Fear of loss. Fear of illness. Fear of the unknown. Those fears did not disappear. but they no longer controlled her. She had learned how to stand with them instead of running away. Her strength did not come from confidence, it came from experience. One afternoon, she received a message from someone who had followed the clinic's work online. A woman going through a public breakup, ashamed and unsure of how to move forward. The message was long and full of pain. She replied simply, "You don't owe anyone the version of your life you planned. You deserve the one you build." After sending it, she sat quietly and realized she had become someone she once needed. That realization felt like peace. At home, her bookshelf had changed. Books about survival gave way to books about purpose. Her walls were no longer bare. They held art and photos that made her feel grounded. On a slow weekend morning, she brewed tea and sat by the window as light filled the room. She felt present, fully. No waiting, no longing, just living. She thought of the woman she once was, standing in a room full of guests, waiting for someone who chose not to come. That woman had believed silence meant failure. Now she understood something deeper. Silence could also mean space, space to grow, space to heal, space to choose again. Her life did not turn out the way she expected. It turned out honest, and honesty, she learned, lasted longer than any promise ever made. As the night grew quiet, she turned out the lights and rested without fear of the morning, whatever came next. She knew she would meet it as herself, not abandoned, not waiting, but whole.